Is Apollo from the Greco-Roman tradition in reality a clever depiction of an alien life form? Stones in France are the waymarkers for intergalactic travelers. Is there a race of red-haired giants in America? And will they change our history? Hi, hello and welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we examine the TV show Ancient Aliens. Do their claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? I'm your host Fredrik, and this is episode 18, and we're going to see what the ancient aliens have to do with the Greek and Norse pantheon. This episode was originally called Gods and Aliens and was aired on November 4th, 2010. To help me sort out the ambrosia from the vinegar is the Drunk Mythology Gals, or, well, at least part of them, but they will soon be able to present themselves in just a moment here. Unfortunately, we did have some issues while recording, so parts towards the end ended up in quite a shamble. So I have summarized, well, at least the story of the Lovelock giants, where we unfortunately had quite a lot of interference. Maybe it's the alien overlords trying to shut us down. So, quickly before they do so, go to our website where you will find sources, resources, and reading suggestions. Just go to diggingupancientaliens.com. There you will also find contact info if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions. And if you like the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I heard so much about. Enough of me jammering. Let's see what happened when aliens went to Greece. So I will welcome, well, half of the show, Drunk Mythology Gals. Welcome.
Hi.
For listeners
Hello.
who might not be familiar with you, could you maybe introduce yourself?
Hey, Drunk Mythology friends. I'm Cait.
And I'm other Jenn.
And we're two of the
Drunk Mythology
Gals.
We're even as guests on somebody else's program, we still can't say the name in sync.
We can't get our shit together.
I will try sync it up in post later.
No. See, that's the shtick, is that I sabotage it. It's become the thing. I openly sabotage our show name, so it never will be in sync.
And she and original Jenn, who can't be here today, basically they start to like spy versus spy each other, trying to anticipate how they're going to sabotage it. But basically the backstory to our podcast is OG, original Jenn, and I both write novels based on mythology, and we take the stories and sort of transpose them into more modern contexts. And I specialized in Greek mythology and she specialized in Norse mythology. And we're like, we have all this research and we get so mad seeing all these other stories and books out there where they don't do their homework and they don't get it right. We're like, why not? Let's just start a podcast. And after a couple of episodes, Jenn messaged me and she's like, you need me on your show. I was like, okay. And then about a month after that.
Is that the version you remember?
That's the version I remember. Because you're awesome.
What's Jenn's version on this, I wonder then?
Oh, are we going all like comparative historiography here?
Well, we're looking for the truth.
Right? Yeah. And so then you come to me for the truth. Yeah. So what was actually, oh my God. That's not enough.
She hasn't even started drinking the vodka yet.
Yeah. I'm sipping vodka here. So she tells me I have to listen to these episodes. So I start listening, and then I'm texting her while listening. I'm like, wait a minute. What did you two just say? wait a minute, is that true? Oh my God, are you serious? That's what the actual myth says? And she's like, yeah, you're joining us. Like it or not, you're now joining us. I was like, wait, what? She's like, too late. And that's how I got sucked in. Yeah, she tells a much nicer, version, but mine's more accurate.
I can't wait to have Jenn actually do her Jenn descriptions of a couple of the photos I put into the script here. But
oh my goodness.
And then we got Kim on board, who's the actual audio professional. She was on Sirius XM for years and in broadcast before that. Yeah. And she does our sound production and occasionally trolls us almost every single time with sound effects.
Yeah. And even outside of the podcast, I'm still the odd one out because all three of them are writers in some fashion. And while I do have some writer aspirations one day, I'm an accountant. I'm an engineer with numbers. And so pair that with me being Generation X, and I'm going to be skeptical about anything and everything. So yeah, this being guests here with you, I was.
But it's good to have the Thomas of the show, the always a skeptic. Wait a moment, that can't be true.
And she's like, can you put that in a spreadsheet? Like, I'm surprised she didn't put her comments in a spreadsheet as she was doing her watching.
I will rope you in later when we start to discuss the Pythagorean mathematic later. It will come up. But I have to ask, have you watched Ancient Aliens previously?
Yes, unfortunately. No, seriously, like, at first, it was just kind of a gag thing with some friends and family members making me watch shows like this and other like paranormal ghost hunting bullshit shows just to enjoy the spectacle of me going off in a ragey puff of smoke.
Yeah.
And then like various people started taking it seriously. And I'm like, no. So yeah, I have seen it before.
For me, I had never even heard of this show until you reached out to us, and I listened to one of your prior episodes, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. Your podcast, not the show.
So you had this ignorant bliss of not knowing about this, and you went around happy, strolling on the fields, and then I come and destroy the
you just ruined everything for her.
Little innocence that's what's left.
Yeah, so then when I sat down to actually watch the episode that we're going to talk about, I was like, oh my God, really? So I now see the History Channel, and for the listeners, I'm doing air quotes, History Channel. I see them in a very different light now. It's like, are you kidding me? Oh my goodness. They're dead to me now.
I'll screenshot some of our select comments in the shared Google Doc when she was doing her watching notes. It's beautiful.
Sounds fantastic. But have you encountered the claims in this episode previously? If you have been into the mythology, have you ever stumbled upon, maybe by mistake, the whole alien connection or similar that we bring up in this episode previously?
Yeah, I've encountered all the various sort of tangents and topics they go through. I have encountered people who are like red-pilled on this and who want to fight me on it, and it doesn't end well.
Yeah, and I've certainly heard the claim that, aliens were involved in the pyramids or Stonehenge, or I think even some of the Aztec structures. I feel like I've heard those being, given credit to aliens, but I've never heard the gods of mythology being described as that was a new one. That was a new one for me.
And I can tell you, if there were gods of mythology, they'd be pissed off at being described as aliens. I'm just saying.
Okay, but should we start to dig down into this whole mess of things?
Only if you're ready.
Yeah. Cait had so much rage.
I'm always ready. Almost. So we have this overture of things that will come up in the episode, always starting on that, and this pompous intro with this strangely 90s graphic, even though this was published in 2010. Quickly we go into Truva, Turkey, for something I wasn't really prepared on, but they bring up the find by a Heinrich Schliemann in 1868. So Heinrich Schliemann was an accountant, if I remember correctly, who went out with the...
Sorry. Other Jen, your people have something to account for here.
So he went out with his copy of the Iliad, dedicated to find the city of Troy. And he then stumbled on a place that he then thought looked like Troy as depicted in the book that he had. And as the understanding is now, it's likely Troy, but the connection to the Iliad is murky as at best. There's some evidence of battle going on the site, but if it's connected with Troy and all of that is, of course, discussed. But there is, well, except from the layering of the site, also connections to Mesopotamia, who is referring to the site as part of Troy, so to say. And it was a powerhouse, so it was likely to be part of a greater conflict or used by Homer as a, narration device in his story, of course, since people might have been familiar with the location.
I just want to say before we get any further, this is really, really insidious because they start by tossing out a relatively tame, plausible, fact or set of conjectures, right? And they back it up with somebody who has UCLA behind them. Like it's a very, to be a lecturer, even though, they're not a professor, but they're a lecturer at UCLA Classics and UC Santa Barbara. That's not an easy position to get. So, he can't be a complete crank, although who knows what time has done. Maybe not. But Schliemann did actually discover, the city, and there's a lot of evidence that you could be like, okay, plausibility.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable. So they literally flip your cognition switch to, okay, possible, reasonable, meh. And then they go on, like that's the last moment where I say okay to anything in this show.
Yeah, the fun thing, they bring this up since it's actually something that's true, just to, get the viewer into, well, this is true, what else can be true in the myth. And
it's like buying into an MLM.
Yeah, and they usually, especially in these earlier seasons, get these real scientists. I'm not that familiar with Richard Rader that you referred, the lecturer at UCLA, but they have tricked several people, especially in the first season, to appear on the show, and then they realize, oh shit, this was not what I signed up for. And
erase that from their CV.
Not everyone. They still, I did this, I'm sorry. So for
a mea culpa.
Yeah, they were tricked, duped into it, or cleverly edited. But I'm not too familiar with Richard Rader, because you have this with PhDs that are believers in this, but they usually study something else, not related to the ancient aliens theories. There's a lot of English lit professors that buy into the ancient alien phenomenon for reasons I have not understood yet.
Yeah, I can get a PhD in underwater basket weaving. That doesn't mean that I know anything about aliens. Oh my God.
I just did a quick live Google. He's actually now a full professor at UC Santa Barbara. And he gets great reviews. He's got, he seems like really, really legit. So,
Cait, do you have anything to add here? I think that you wrote a...
Jenn?
Okay, so...
Oh, Jenn?
This is where the problem with having me here and not knowing history very well at all is I'm watching this and I'm asking, is Troy a real place? Was Troy a real place? Are we, this guy says they found Troy, but like, aren't there similar archaeological sites all over this region? How do we know Homer wasn't just writing about any town, Turkey? It's
okay, that is now going to be a forever phrase for us. Anytown, Turkey. Like anytime they mention Anatolia, it's like Anytown, Turkey.
Several months ago, the gals exposed me to Phantom of the Opera beyond just knowing the name of it. I'd never seen the play. I'd never read the book, movie, none of it. I'd heard of it, of course, but I'd never read or watched any of it. And I knew it was a work of fiction, but I didn't know that it took place in an actual opera house that really exists. And I got to visit that opera house last month. And that's why they were telling me about it ahead of that visit. But
the Opéra Garnier in Paris?
Knowing that
accordions.
the Palais Garnier in Paris exists doesn't mean that the Phantom story was true. Just because the setting was real doesn't make the characters real, because if that's all that we need for determining fact versus fiction is if the setting is real, the location, then there are some really awesome rom-com characters that I read about in novels taking place in New York City, and I want to meet those characters right now, please.
And
oh my God.
And here's the deal. The history, the concept of history qua history as we know it, as this objective empirical, or at least attempt at objective empirical study, and also from a Western European historical tradition, because other cultures, not looking at you, ancient China or ancient India or Africa or anything like that, that maybe also had historical traditions, that really didn't kick in until Herodotus rolls around. And you get Herodotus, then you get Thucydides. But the first thing that Herodotus does, literally in the first page of the book, or lines of the scroll as it may be, is to debunk the myth of Io and Zeus.
Yeah, Herodotus is kind of the father of history, or as he's known among historians, the father of lies.
Well,
wow.
This is one of those rare instances where both are kind of right, because while he took a very pragmatic, show me the money kind of approach to mythology, he was like, wag the dog, let's get this propaganda out there for everything else that was actually historically happening. But I don't know why everyone is always so stuck on Homer. Like, is that the only source they know? And if so, that is I mean, even though the concept of strictly factual history is a bit wishy-washy even today, because I don't know, thousands of articles argue about it, it's pretty clear from the tens of thousands of other texts that we have uncovered throughout the goddamn ancient Mediterranean that the ancient Hellenic peoples were extremely scientifically curious, and they also like to mindfuck each other. So if you've ever heard of Zeno's paradoxes, That was the freshman philosophy 101 class paper that inspired my first true grown-up fit of rage.
But now we have established that since Homer mentioned a town that turned out to be true, everything else in mythology must be true. We...
That is not how you logic. That is not how you logic.
That's how ancient alien logics. So we go from Greek to Sumeria and their favorite story, because we have heard this basically every episode since one. The Anunnaki. Were you familiar with the
yes.
Anunnaki? So we have Jason Martell, who comes in, and he's a fixture on this show and talks about how Anunnaki is translated to, what does it say, those from heaven come to earth, something like that.
They called their gods the Anunnaki, and that term simply meant those who from heaven come to earth.
Which comes from Zechariah Sitchin, who claims he read ancient Mesopotamian cuneiform scrolls, except that his translations goes against what the ancient Mesopotamians own dictionaries say the words means. So it's like someone angry.
But he's right. Don't you know? He's right, because he speaks English.
He speaks English.
And he speaks English, and like he has access to the internet.
No, this was written in the 70s, this book. So that's why...
Well, he could see a Dewey Decimal card catalog.
So I think a lot of these claims comes from especially the 70s, when, Google wasn't a thing, really, and you need to go to the library and access materials that was, to most people, hard to obtain. Today, these claims are almost ridiculous, because anyone with a web browser can basically access ancient Mesopotamian dictionaries with just a simple Google search. So again, but the Anunnaki is, basically children to the sky god An.
I mean, I have a weird theory, and as a good pseudo-epigraphical historian, I will say that this is solely my own conspiracy based on a bit of, psychology, etymology, and that motherfucker Carl Jung. I think these people love using the Anunnaki because it sounds ancient and exotic. So it sort of justifies, it's like the checkbox for progressive thought cred or, liberal academic cred. And yet the story encapsulates a fairly common spiritual and religious heuristic, which makes it accessible, which makes it easier to swallow that humanity, quote unquote, shares common mythological tropes for a special reason. Although I'm pretty sure that Jung would have been like, hey, here's my card. You need therapy. Like if he ever encountered these people claiming that aliens were the reason for his theory of, common mythological tropes. So, yeah, I'm just saying.
But there is a psychology connection. Previously, they claimed that people who hear voices really hear aliens, just to be extra dangerous for everyone.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they did.
Oh my God.
Mentally ill people.
That is not how you science. That is not how you science.
Oh my goodness.
So,
boy.
Yeah, they are pretty dangerous for many reasons, not just because it's silly ideas. Since we're talking about Sitchin, the Anunnaki, we move on to the grandfather of the whole phenomenon, von Däniken, and a plug for his book from the early 2000s, Odyssey of the Gods. And again, he raised the idea with the primitive forefathers that, can't understand and describe things.
Some thousands of years ago, when our forefathers were still primitive, some extraterrestrials descended to our planet. And because of misunderstanding, lack of technology, our forefathers thought that these extraterrestrials must be some gods.
Because people who had writing didn't have the words to describe UFO and aliens, so therefore, they describe them as gods.
700 years ago, we described comets as like a sign from God. There wasn't a word for comet. It was light in the sky. Just saying. Also, a quick question. Did von Daniken write Chariots of the Gods as well?
Yeah, he's the famous author to Chariots of the Gods.
That motherfucker. He's Swiss, I think,
yeah,
right?
he is Swiss.
And now I know why OG isn't here. Her people have some shit to answer for.
So von Daniken is a quite known con man. And yeah, he wrote the famous Chariots of the Gods. I forgot it for a second in self-defense. It happens.
No, I'm sorry. You repressed the memory. We're going to have to do some regression therapy and some hypnosis to recover your memories.
Yeah, that might be needed. But
run away.
Or to repress them.
I wasn't so familiar with this book, so I needed to, find it and flip through it to see what, where they got this idea, because they usually base the episode on his different books. This is not the first time he plugs a book on the show, so I just wanted to go through, and I realized that he has his ways of describing things, and he has this artistic approach to things. So on page 35...
Is that what you call it?
It was what himself called it on accident when he was called out in an interview.
Oh, wow.
But on page 35 in the book, he talks about the Epic of Gilgamesh and a robot that's supposed to be in there that he calls Shumbaba. Which I went, what?
Chumbawamba?
Yeah, Shumbaba.
Sorry, one of the things on our podcast is we really like to butcher ancient names. So...
Yeah, it usually comes from me not being able to pronounce them. Like, what?
But, so I started to try to find this Shumbaba or Shumbalaba, but realizing that it's not what
Shambhala.
this thing is called, because he gets the name wrong. It's Humbaba or Huvava.
Oh, fun.
Humbug.
Oh my God. He can't even get the name right.
No. So he made Jenn or Cait. But this robot, as he called it, is described in Tablet 2 in Gilgamesh as having paws of a lion and a body of covered in thorny scales, and his feet has claws of vultures, and his head wear horns of a wild bulls, and his tail had a phallus each that's end with a snake's head. You know how robots usually look
what?
like.
What the fuck did you... Wait. Oh my God. Holy shit. Okay. He said, Cait, I heard what I think I heard, didn't I?
About the phalluses
Yes.
or the claws?
Yes.
Or with the paws?
All of it, but
fucking thing.
The whole thing. But yeah, the you really brought it home there with the phallus with ending in a snake head. Cait, we need an episode on our podcast that covers this character. And we'll have Fredrik on as a guest.
Yeah, and I think we need to compare this character to the ones in, I think it's episode 3, Patricide is the New Black, where we talk about Kronos and Zeus and the Hekontokeres, which are the 100-headed, 100-handed, or 300-handed...
we tried to count how many hands and mouths.
I don't math. I've learned my lesson. I no longer math on our podcast.
I was too drunk to count it correctly, and it was it was bad. But yeah, so
we just need like it's not something we should.
Yeah.
But and I remember on that episode, OG had a very interesting question. Like, okay, so if it's the like there was a monster that had snake heads for its feet and toes and fingers. And she's like, is it the front end of the snake? The back end of the snake? What happens to the back end of the snake? Like she's
right.
She's obliquely veering into human centipede territory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get that you have questions. This is why mythology is ugh. And also, Fredrik, you are coming on to the podcast because it's too late. Hope you enjoyed your freedom while you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was already
it
decided, so I've accepted my fate there already.
Yeah. But, kidnapped by drunk women. Sounds like the main ads, but hey, we're a lot nicer. But also, didn't Van Daniken have some fairly shady pseudo-fascist tendencies?
Pseudo-fascist is quite nice. Usually they are, we have everything to...
upstanding members of the community?
Yeah, like Holocaust deniers and all of that, the Elder of Science protocol, you name it.
Oh.
And if you start to...
You want to talk about historiography.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember... hearing about Von Daniken and the chariots of the gods and how he's not somebody you should just take at face value.
Definitely not. And you may notice it especially in his writings that when he talks about, let's say, people with more pigment, it's always how primitive they are, usually in the same sentence. So the primitive Egyptians, the primitive Maya,
of course.
But when
as opposed to the Norse.
Yeah. When he talks about the Germanic,
and the Anglo-Saxons,
the British,
Gauls,
it's usually they worked with the aliens building. They got maybe instructions.
They were open to learning.
Yeah. But this little sidetrack aside, let's get back to Greece and Olympus, the home of the gods. And I always picture, ancient Greece skeptics climbing up on Mount Olympus going, ha, called it, and then climbs down.
That would be me. That would absolutely be me. And I'd come back down and say, all of you are full of shit. There's nothing up there but granite. And then
some snow.
And some snow. Yeah. Oh my God.
Even though it was easily climbed, the show then started to talk about how Mount Olympus wasn't necessarily the top of a mountain, you see, because that would be ridiculous. It's, in fact, a spaceship. Because in the ancient text, I think it's our friend Giorgio Tsoukalos, the meme guy, as he's better known as, saying that usually there was
I think of him...
There was this big rumbling, so the whole mountaintop just lifted up and flew away without referencing where he read that. But that's usual to him. But yeah, how were you familiar with Tsoukalos?
Did you ever see the movies There's Something About Mary?
I recognize the name, but at the moment I can't.
There's a hair gel scene.
Yes. Oh
and
my
that's
God.
all I can think of whenever I see him.
Yeah, we won't go further into the movie, but yeah, I was, as soon as he came on screen, I was just like, oh, please tell me this guy is just putting on a shtick. Tell me this is not legit. Tell me he's acting just for ratings, please.
The thing with Giorgio is that you have those that seems to be true believers who usually have their main area of expertise. So there's this David Childress that you see quite a lot of in this episode. I think he's a true believer because he usually talks about the same things and repeats the same phrases all the time. Tsoukalos,
right?
He contradicts himself in every other episode. He's one of those who just tell me what you say and I be on camera. That's fine. I have my bronze fake tan on. I have my hair gel done.
Hair gel. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
No, it's, and he is the smarmiest. You can just tell by his body language, by his eye, like he is saying whatever needs to be said in order to make the ad revenue. And something must be wrong either with the world or with us, that he's making millions and we're not.
Right?
Yeah, you can buy a ticket to his
I'm
show
just
for
saying.
like $300.
Oh my word.
So we chose the wrong side in all of this.
Cait's throwing shit.
That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here.
She's throwing shit.
Why? Okay.
Oh,
I mean,
my goodness.
You know, maybe the whole glitter thing that was a spaceship / halls of Zeus.
Oh, I almost forgot about that. Yeah.
Snow.
Yeah. They talk about it sparkling. Have they
like
never
Edward
studied
Cullen, sparkling snow?
Have they never studied geology? Have these guys never stepped foot in a kitchen with a granite countertop? Oh my
Have
God.
they never heard of a volcano? Because a volcano, or maybe an eruption, or maybe an avalanche, or just bullshit imagination because ancient knights were long without the internet.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. How far away is the nearest volcano?
And from
Moving right along.
from Olympus that takes flight, we go to the weapons of Zeus and Poseidon's that, of course, are energy weapons.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Sorry.
I mean, does this dude realize it's a metaphor for the penis?
Michael Creamer.
Literally, all the ancient stories
serious?
that have to do with Zeus and the lightning bolts are speaking in code about his ancient quote-unquote big dick energy.
Oh my God. Cait, you've never told me this before. Oh my God.
The more you know. Bum, bum.
And I now know Cait's gonna do an episode on our show on this very topic now. She's gonna...
Well, you know, there's the one, the Great Penis Party, and I ruined French baguettes for everyone. So but basically, you know, the old chestnut that 99% of problems in mythology come from Zeus not being able to keep it in his pants. That's like 85% true. And literally, it doesn't have to do with his thunderbolts. It has to do with his dick. And but you know, if you look at the various iterations of the creation of ancient man, according to Hesiod, who never seems to be mentioned as much as Homer. Wonder why? Maybe because Hesiod was from Boeotia and Boeotians were supposed to be boring. And the Theogony is not the most thrilling reading you've ever done. But anyway, basically, you know, you've got this affirmation over and over again that male sexuality, male virility, male strength is what is emphasized and valued and worshipped. And, you know, to a certain degree, that in the, you know, old times, however you want to define them, you know, there were obvious advantages to fighting off various things that wanted to eat you with strength, agility, whatever, and, you know, whatever testosterone bestows. But, you know, it's all metaphor. The whole lightning bolt thing, yes, that is, you know, it's code for such a complex concept of male virility, male strength. And by the way, you know, if you grow up in the Midwest or the Southeast and you sneeze wrong, there's a thunderstorm that creates a tornado and fucks everything over, destroying entire cities. And lightning can also do damage, and especially in a super fucking dry climate like ancient Greece, where everything was drought and turns into a tinderbox in the summer. And I am done.
It's... I mean, this whole segment where they're talking about these these devices, and all I could sit there is I'm sitting there watching this and I'm reminded of when my youngest daughter, she would play princess when she was a tiny little kid, and she's messing up her room, and I never pointed the blame of the messy room at the sparkly plastic wand that came from the dollar store.
No.
That wasn't the cause of the destruction. There was a more logical explanation. It was her, knocking things over because, gravity. Bump the dresser, things topple off. Novel concept.
But could you not extrapolate that in an abstract theoretical sense to say that maybe the destruction only occurred when she grasped the wand and thought of herself as this omnipotent being?
Right.
Whatever. I mean, George, what's his nuts, needs to fucking sit down and seriously wait for Zeus to come around and spank him for blaspheming his own goddamn heritage. Like, how dare he? Like, this whole I'm just asking to cover gaps in logic and giving legitimacy to patently false claims. Also, Poseidon was kind of a bigger dick than Zeus. And he doesn't get nearly enough shade because everybody's like, oh, Zeus, ha, ha, ha. We all know about Zeus. But the Trident and Poseidon.
Yeah, he gets off quite
I'm looking
easily.
at you, Medusa. I feel you, Medusa, Team Medusa.
But,
oh, my goodness.
Yeah, Giorgio, note that Giorgio usually put this what if in what he says. There's usually a what if somewhere because...
Just asking.
Yeah, you're doing the, what's his name? The old MMA fighter.
What if
Rogan?
What if is
I'm
the
just asking
right
questions.
prompt?
What if?
What if is the writer
I want to
prompt
punch
for
the next
fiction?
person who says that.
But
there's a whole TV series called What If. It's fiction.
No.
But how about we talk a little bit about Apollo? Because there's the main gist. We gloss over a little bit on Zeus and Poseidon. Just they had energy weapons, and then we move on to Apollo and von Däniken, who claims that Apollo is the first teacher of the young Greeks, and he teaches them how to make buildings on mountain and the hillside, and how to make roads, astronomy. I think he wanted to say astrology, but got mixed up. And
this is how I feel about that.
For the listeners who can't see this, Cait is flipping the middle finger onto the camera right now.
Two of them.
She's so enraged. Yeah, somewhere. I did have a legitimate question. Again, I'm the one that doesn't know anything, so I have all these questions. I take in this information and then I try to validate it. Why? I don't know if we got to this point or not, but Apollo being known to both the Romans and the Greeks, why is that? Is there a reason why all the other gods and goddesses have different names, but Apollo's name is not different between the Romans and the Greeks?
So technically there are...
Or is that even accurate?
That's not quite accurate. There are a couple of deities who have the same name from Greek to Roman. Of course, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I do know that this is an actual fact. I will look it up later and figure it out. But no, it most of them got translated. Like I would say 98% of them got translated. There are like 3 or 4 that didn't. But, that's no great shakes in terms of making Apollo something super special.
No, but he was a favored god, especially since he had his oracles connected to him and the source of divination and all of that.
A lot of people getting high and being like, I can see the future.
But he was not famous for teaching people how to build houses and road. He was somewhat of a teacher in some sources, and here von Däniken base all of this on a German translation of the Argonautica from 1776 to be extra annoying because you won't find that so easily, and you probably won't be able to read German from the 1700s. Make it extra difficult to, reference his text. And even that he referenced his own books, the German versions of them, in the English version, means that why not put in the English title so people go and buy your book? They won't go and find a German lexicon to find out what else you wrote in the 1980s. I don't know.
Before there was Google and you could selectively be like, oh, those two cards in the card catalog stuck together.
Basically, they talk a little bit about the Romans importing their gods from Greece and missing the our monotheistic societies usually don't think about this, that in pluralistic religions, it's quite easy to just pick and choose the gods that you like. You don't worship all the gods in the pantheon all the time. You usually pick your favorite one and you stick to it. In ancient Egypt, for example, they import a lot of the Greek ones because, that's cool. And the Greeks found Egyptians and, this one works well in ours. We just rename it. We maybe put it together with another one and then mix and mash. We even have records from, or prayer cards from ancient Egypt where there's one of them, there's this guy that's really angry with his god. So angry, in fact, that if the god doesn't start to help him out, he will switch god. He promised. So they had this more...
Well, and you've got Hermes and Asclepius. Asclepius himself is sort of a mutt god. And I don't mean the Egyptian god mutt. I mean like mutt as in dogs.
Yeah.
Because he's a combination of Egyptian, Greek, and sort of Pan-Phoenician healing gods. And, that's an example of just ascribing whatever you want to that particular god. Because, Norse mythology in some ways is a lot simpler to grasp because you've got the prose Edda and the poetic Edda. And you've got maybe, some ancillary interpretations and contemporary, commentary. But over the course of the archaic, classical, late classical, Hellenistic, and Roman eras, you have so many versions of so many myths, and you have regional and straight language translation issues, and you have human scribe mistakes, and you have, like you said, humans deciding to just change which god does what because they can. I mean,
artistic license.
It's fan fiction, like legit fan fiction. I mean, last week on was it last week? It was on our latest episode, Dionysus. Dionysus apparently went to India and taught them how to build cities and agriculture and other rites, according to Diodorus Siculus. I mean,
sounds familiar.
Okay, Diodorus might have been a couple hundred years after Homer and Hesiod. And no one ever talks about the rap battle between Homer and Hesiod.
No, it's...
There is a legit rap battle between Homer and Hesiod that we're going to be doing an episode on very, very soon.
It will be interesting to hear that one.
Fun.
It doesn't get too much attention.
I'm going to flow. My flow is going to be amazing.
They talk a little bit about Apollo having the same name among the Romans and the Greeks. I think we covered that nicely. And they leave us floating here and takes us to France and the Carnac stones again. But at least this one we have Childress walking on site at Carnac, talking on how archaeologists are baffled on how they managed to get stones to stand up. And
did he not read the National Geographic article from like the 90s about how the group of scientists actually recreated how they lifted the stone faces on Easter Island? Like levers, Levers, sledges, lubrication.
We also have, what's his name, Willie Wallington. So that was a gentleman who built his own Stonehenge by himself in his backyard using levers and sticks and ropes. And he managed, one person, no machinery, just patient and just thought about it. So it's possible. And they usually indicate that these Carnac stones were shipped to the site, which is not true. I've been to Carnac and there's rocks everywhere. Granite, you just need to roll it a little bit to get it in line and you're finished, basically.
Because the world might be older. Hang on if I'm saying something new, but the world might be older than 4,000 years. And there might have been glaciers and ice ages that pushed stone to the surface in certain northern latitudes.
Yes.
And just
You're saying that there's possibilities for boulders.
I'm just asking.
You're just asking questions. Have you thought about the boulders?
I'm just positing a theory out there.
What if the stones were there all along?
If I posit a theory, that must mean I'm right.
Right.
And then Michael Cremo comes in talking about these intersecting lines and triangles that's only visible from the air. And I couldn't really get this, but we get to that a bit later down the notes because they will start to add formations over the stones just so you can see them, and they're just randomly painted everywhere.
Thousands of large stones have been arranged in very interesting patterns. They're arranged in intersecting lines that form triangles that could only be visible from above the earth.
But
the whole only visible from the air line. That, oh my God, I was wanting to throw things. Have these people never walked
I was never more proud.
Yeah, I don't know if we didn't say this in the beginning. So I was in a Google Doc typing my reactions while I was watching this show, and Cait I shared it with her, so she was watching my typing because we're not in the same location. So she's watching the typing and she's commenting in the document as well, and she's like, "I'm so proud. I'm so proud. I'm so proud. I'm so proud." And I'm like,
you validate my existence.
Yeah,
you make me real.
And it's like, have these people never walked in a cemetery? A few years ago, I went on a field trip with my kid to Washington, D.C., and it included a visit to the National Cemetery. There are over 400,000 graves in National Cemetery. 400,000. That's crazy number of dead bodies. And this was a highlight for me, not because of the dead bodies. It was.
I mean, that's what.
Yeah, Cait would be all about that. But for me, it was that all the gravestones were in neat and orderly rows. And I was standing on the ground. I did not have
a
to
spreadsheet.
be in the air. Oh, yes, it was like a spreadsheet. I did not have to be in the air.
A terrible spreadsheet.
To recognize that these were in like perfect angles and the lines going this way and 90 degrees that way. So if you stood,
that
it was
that they use the same technology.
I probably even stopped to take a picture. Exactly.
So if you want a straight line, all you need is two people and then just a piece of string or rope or anything, and you can just measure it out. So
have you ever seen on YouTube, there are these like ancient tool and ancient survival shelter building videos? I as I was like rooting around and kind of preparing for this episode, I found, how you actually grind a stone into being a sharp axe edge, and then how you grind it into being a chisel, and then how you dig and build and mix basic clay. And I'm like, Yeah, that works.
Cait,
that works.
After this recording, we're going to discuss why you were watching this, but carry on.
My algorithm just gives up. It has given up trying to predict me, because from K-pop to Bondi Beach Rescue to
archaeology,
like.
And then she added in another cute little photograph of her like ducking underneath this little stone structure where novel concept. They put one stone on top of another. Ooh, wow. Yeah.
Not like Stonehenge at all. Like these giant stone pieces that it must have been aliens being like, man, you lost your mom. That's so sad. Let me build a dolmen for you with my tractor beam.
Yeah, dolmen is the most, or among the oldest constructions, especially in grave settings, because they are quite simple.
Yep.
You take 2 stones, put them up, and then you put a roof over, and
you can do that because nobody else has much else to do, at night except stand around and like brace the stone while you lift the other one up. Like that's just. But the thing that they're not saying is about these stones is that these weren't just one person being buried. These were generations, hundreds, if not thousands of years of key, tribal leaders and their families being buried in these structures. They have layers of bodies that they have excavated, because it's not just one special person being buried. Like
not in the dolmens. It's, as you say, it's a multi-generational usage. Even in Scandinavia, where we have those, it's usually families. It's more later, as the society goes more stratified, that you build more bigger monuments for single individuals. But in the
and then yet we're also coming back around, because when I was in Italy visiting some of my family, we went to their graves, and they had been cremated, and they were in a little square in a mausoleum wall, like this huge wall. So if that's not a modern dolmen, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's somewhat is. From Carnac, we go back to Greece, to Pindar, and the land of Hyperborea, where, according to the show, the sun shines for 24 hours. So,
the ancient Greek poet Pindar spoke of a mystical land called Hyperborea, far to the north, where the sun shined 24 hours a day.
Of course, we're talking about Scandinavia, and are going to open up towards, coming up here, and I put a little picture on how...
Yay, you did a picture too!
If you want to see the 24-hour Swedish sun, it is bright at the moment.
Oh my God.
Now, is this true?
Is this live right now?
24 hours?
Well, a little bit before we started the recording.
Like right before we started recording? Wow.
At the moment, it's soon.
Holy crap.
But from this, they talk about, the Hyperborea. That's apparently a land far to the north. And they're referring to Pindar for reasons I don't really understand. He mentioned it twice. Nothing with 24-hour sun or anything like that. So again, it's the more artistic approach to the whole storytelling. So he mentioned it in his victory poems with Pythian 10s and Olympian 3. Herodotus bring it up too, but again, doesn't really mention what they mentioned in the show. So again, not really showing off their sources here. This is Succulus, who comes in and talk about Apollo, the teacher, who flew over the Argos, scaring the Argonauts, or telling the Greek people, I'm going to sod off to the north and teach some people up there, or whatever he says.
I heard what you said there.
And
so hang on. There actually is one kernel of truth in Pindar. He mentions Pythias the Greek, who was actually from ancient Greek Marseille, or we actually did an episode on this back in our Greek Norse-vember, because there's Norse-vember, which is like a big hashtag theme. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just do Greek Norse-vember, where I tried to find the crossings between ancient Greeks and ancient regular Norse mythology, pre-8th century Norse. And one of the things I found was Pythias the Greek. And in 300-ish BCE, he set forth on a voyage, not using any particularly interesting navigational tools, just hugging the coast, hugging the coast, and instead of going up the rivers through Gaul. And he made it all the way to not just, the Scandinavia region, because they never quite differentiate. It's always Norse,
Pythias got pretty far.
Pythias got pretty far. He got to fucking Iceland, I think, according to...
I'd have to go back and look at the notes to see
I think he may have gotten close to Iceland. Remember that heaving ice video that I showed? He talked about this rolling ice on the oceans, and I found a video of it, and I was like, whoa, it makes me sick. But
he got pretty far north.
It's not because Pythias is like, I wonder what's so far to the north. There was a long established trade from, Greek Marseille to, the north. And it was more like sort of a hopscotch thing where, these group of peoples would travel this far up, the rivers into Gaul, and this group of people would take over and travel further north. And then this group of people, it's like a giant game of telephone. And so Pythias was like, you know what? I'm going to talk to the OP on this. And he's like, I'm just going to, instead of the rivers, I'm just going to hug the coast. And he made it all the way up there. And I mean, Aliens sounds like it's more fun, but
the trade networks were quite
I'm so done.
extensive during the time. This show likes to either everyone is isolated or they are somehow super connected. They switching
because aliens
because the aliens was that helped them. But the whole idea of Apollo sodding off comes again from Mr. Daniken.
You can say sodding off, but I know what it means.
But it builds on Von Daniken misquoting the Argo story in his book that we're quoting. So he's talking about Apollo flying his way from Lycia and scaring the Argonauts, and so much that they go to land. I'm not going to read the full text now, but the original text is a bit more, it's different, so to say. But
I mean, according to that particular version of the Argonaut story, again, for every story of the Argonauts that, the author, it's himself, because it's always himself, hails as definitive, they're like 3 other people in 3 other regions at the same time saying this is definitive. So they can all just sod off.
But let's sod back to Carnac, because now we're going to tie up the bag here. So the Carnac, it was really signs for aliens, because aliens, you need road signs so you can find your ways, and since the Carnac stones are visible from outer space,
allegedly,
clearly this was this was ancient mansplaining about aliens mansplaining to each other because nobody would ask directions
somehow, because they can invent interstellar travel, but not a GPS for some reason.
Right.
But then we see now on the screen the formations in the Carnac stones. I put it in the show notes there even.
Okay, other Jen.
Oh my God.
It's time to describe it.
Oh my God. Okay, you want me to describe? Okay, so you'll see the same picture. You'll see this same image if you watch the episode, but I beg you not to. Save yourselves. Run away. Yeah, it's basically just this grid, which, spreadsheet, it's, rows and columns.
It's a basic grid that actually is legit in archaeology because you want to be able to pinpoint where you're digging. And what
it
you're
wouldn't
doing,
be this
blah,
big,
blah, blah.
but we use grid system in archaeology. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're trying. They've drawn shapes on top of this grid. And I'm just reminded of the toddler sorting toy that, square shape goes in the square hole. Triangle shape goes in the triangle hole. Oh, we have a little triangle goes in. The little triangle goes in the little triangle hole. And it's just, that's all I could see was, oh my God. I'm like, okay, I can draw this over anything and explain it to make it make sense.
The symbols aren't really connected. And if you look at it, you will start to notice that there's stones in the middle of the symbols, and the symbols don't really relate to anything really. It's just somewhat floating around the stones. And then Van Daniken comes in and started to talk about how it's 2,860 meters, something. And then, not angels, angles.
Yeah. Angles.
And the angles. And he claims it's Pythagorean.
2 squares, 2 triangles, and a star equals Las Vegas. Like, what?
He's claiming that this is
that your GPS
Pythagorean triangles in a geometrical pattern from the Stone Age, mind you, which is impossible for our Stone Age people had no idea of Pythagoras triangles. Pythagoras was about 420 BC.
The distances of the lines are always the same, 2,860 meters, or exactly the half of 2,860 meters. The angles are always the same. It's Pythagorean triangles. It's all a gigantic geometrical pattern. From Stone Age, which is impossible. Our Stone Age people had no idea of Pythagoras triangles. Pythagoras was about 420 BC.
How could he know about triangles?
Of course. Other Jen, I need you to take point on this one.
Yeah, this is where I was screaming at the TV. Oh my God.
And I felt so proud.
Yes, a triangle is a triangle is a triangle. We do not have to understand Pythagorean's theorem to know what a triangle is. Oh my God.
And no one ever thought of splitting a triangle.
Right.
Into two triangles.
Yeah. So my kids, Fredrik, do you have kids? I think you said you have
2
kids,
of them.
right? Okay. How old are they?
4 and 2. So we're still on the blocks.
Oh, they're perfect. Yes, perfect age. So, around 2 years old, they start stacking blocks. They didn't go to college and get a degree in engineering.
Hey, mind you, we put them in university the day they went out.
Well, the Scandinavian school systems are always so much more.
This is true. Okay, disclaimer, I'm a product of the United States public education system. Not great here. Yeah, but toddlers, like age 2, they do not need an engineering degree to be fascinated by the concept of stacking blocks. And it doesn't take them much longer beyond that initial fascination, maybe give it a year or 2 before they realize, oh, wait, if I'm a little more careful and I line them up a little bit better, stacking them a little more neatly, I can get more blocks before they topple. The kids don't. Humans don't need the explanation in order to understand that the rule applies. Did I explain that right?
Yeah. And I mean, you know how we have different types of telescopes in astronomy? Like you've got radio telescopes, you've got microwave, infrared, blah. Obviously nothing's coming to the top of my mind because I can always, I'm one of those people who is absolutely sure of the basic fact, but 100% fails when it comes to recalling on the spot the exact example. But this is basically the Neolithic, not Stone Age. It's Neolithic equivalent of that. And, you know, Pythagoras was the first Western philosopher to actually codify, ostensibly, the formula of this triangle theory. But there's actually significant evidence that he actually traveled to other places in what was seen as Asia Minor of antiquity, like Phoenicia, Turkey. I can't remember the exact ones, but there's a book called Music of the Spheres that is all about the history of Pythagoras and the Pythagorean theorem and what we actually know and what we don't know. And it's a marvelous combination of history, philosophy, theory, mathematics that makes it easy for people who don't math or who don't history to follow the trail of logic. But basically, you know, he didn't just get hit with an apple of Idun on the head one day and be like, oh, gravity, Pythagorean theorem. Like, there was a lot of ancient arguing back and forth via letters and scrolls and stuff, and basically academic articles back in the day. Nothing is new. Like, it didn't come from a vacuum. Just
ideas grow, and that's a bit nefarious with the show that they somehow don't think that people can come up with things for some reason. You can't invent stories, you can't be creative, I don't know, it's just strange.
You can't smoke random herbs and get high or like ingest them. You know, like the cornucopia of things that would get you high in the ancient world.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. But from these, you know, we can't do triangles without knowing the math, we move on to the colder countries, my home country, and, well, of course, Norway and Denmark and those others, but we don't need to talk that much about them.
Scandinavia.
But we talk about Scandinavia, or the Norsemen who lived here. The ancient Norsemen, they even call. I wouldn't call, I don't know, 700 BC or AC.
That's
really that ancient.
1,000 years. Sorry. Excuse me.
Frog. This is the category.
But they like to throw in the whole ancient wherever they can, and these advanced techniques that these Norse had, like navigation. There's the most navigation they love to do. The Vikings and Vendel and all of that was hug the coast because that's easy and scary. The voyagers on the open sea was quite rare, and if they could avoid it, they preferred to avoid it for obvious reasons. If you've seen the boats, they are quite narrow, they are quite harrowing to sail in. It's possible.
It's not fun.
No, but if you stay at the coast,
no toilet facilities.
Staying at the coast is the way to go. That's why we, at least in Scandinavia, have a lot of coastal monuments, which, you know, way to find your way to where you want to go. But they talk about how these Norsemen had gods, of course, And could it be the same gods as the Greeks?
There are a number of similarities between Greek mythology and Norse mythology, and many of the gods are almost identical, and they do much the same thing.
And the show claims that they are, of course, identical. We have Jonathan Young, who has a PhD in something I don't remember. It's not related to this, but anyway. So it's
he's not Carl Jung. Jonathan Young.
It's different. Yeah. And but he talks about Zeus and Odin or sky fathers. That's somewhat correct, somewhat loosely. Yeah,
they are both known as sort of the rulers of their particular pantheon. It's not so much that they necessarily rule the people, because that's why they have human kings. It's like middle management.
But they were the archetype of the pantheon.
They are if you think of the dare I say Trinity. They're the big sky daddy, the OG god.
And they talk about how they travel through the skies in chariots and what?
Yes, I was like, Cait, did I forget something?
No, you didn't forget anything. Zeus didn't have a fucking chariot.
These are representing the sun, because the ancient knew that life comes from the sun, wait, the Nordic sun god
agriculture. It's agriculture and fucking.
Cait's losing it. Point. She's absolutely losing it.
But Zeus and Odin doesn't really have anything to do with the sun. It's Apollo. Helios. I'm sorry. It's getting late. Yeah,
it's Helios, not Apollo.
Even though they grow together a bit later, but
I'm going to my happy place. I'm suppressing the PTSD.
God for the sun in the Nordics is Sol, which literally translates to sun, if you want to do it in English. But no, Odin don't fly around in a chariot. It was mostly Freya and Thor.
Okay, chariots.
Right, yes. Freya, she's got the chariot pulled by the cats. And then Thor, it's actually more of a boat than a chariot, right? And it's pulled by goats. Isn't this right, Cait? Am I right?
All that matters is that goats and cats do not equal dilithium engines.
Or aliens. Yeah. I want to. Cait, do I get a gold star for remembering that?
You get all the gold stars.
Yay!
And, it has been fairly conclusively delineated and elucidated that the ancient Norse gods are pretty derivative of Greco-Roman gods, because not only were there the endemic localized beliefs of nature gods, which might have had to do with weather, agriculture, fertility, I don't know. And, syncretism is nothing new. But the Romans were also really just so good at colonizing and then exporting their culture from there, so that even if they didn't get as far north as, maybe the ancient chancla that they discovered back in 2019 in Norway, the style was there. Like Aldo Aldo Shoes has its tentacles everywhere. But say it with me. Fuck the Romans.
Fuck the Romans.
Yeah, you have these cultures that ripple through Europe. Mm-hmm. The Vikings were pretty good at picking up gods. For example, we have found the Buddha statues here in Sweden. Bronze Buddha and Birka, imported from the Middle East. So they picked up things, they incorporated, and there's evidence that the Vikings even switched religions to Islam just to get access to the better trading inside its cities. So, when we're down here, we're Islam, but back home we're doing Odin and all of that. So,
my ex-husband, his family had a property way up on what I like to call the east buttfuck coast of Maine, which is absolutely beautiful. But there was actually an archaeological study done on the property by the University of Maine because they found Norse coins and trading items from...
What Cait is talking about here is the Maine penny, and it was found by a treasure enthusiast who claimed it was located at a Goddard site. The fine circumstances are, well, murky at best, but we do know that this is in fact a Norwegian penny, most likely minted between 1065 or between 1085 CE, and it's a single find as we usually call these. No more coins or other Norse items have so far been found on the site. 1065 as the earliest estimate for the mint are also after the, well, forgive my friends, Lönsons aus Meadows had been abandoned, so that was a Viking settlement, a short-lived one in Newfoundland. But the settlements on Greenland were still active, and on the site has been discovered Dorset culture burning, which is a type of stone flake, indicating that there were probably trade networks coming from Newfoundland and even north of it, down towards Maine. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
That period, like, 600-700 years before Columbus, but who's counting? And they found that the Red Shell people and the Norse, there had been trade there. And, if you actually take a fairly northern route, it's not impossible to get all the way to like Labrador and then down to the, upper North American Maine, coast of Maine. And, it's, there's actually a really, really good book by this guy, Michael Pye, called The Edge of the World. And it talks about not just the synchronicity between the quote unquote Norse and the Anglo-Saxons and ancient Irish, but it talks about how when, the Romans were trying to export Christianity up north, they changed it and they reinterpreted it to include a very northern-centric viewpoint. And, this book goes into trading customs. It goes into all sorts of things. It's incredible. I highly, highly recommend it.
And especially Snorre's Edda, that many is familiar with, is written from a Christian perspective. So when you read it, it's explained for a Christian king, basically, his ancestor. But they talk a little bit about Zeus, and then they show a Swedish helmet from Vendel that I just reacted to.
I mean, half the pictures that they show have nothing to do, or maybe are 1,500 to 2,000 years after whatever they're talking about.
Yeah, they like that because they have stock photos of those. So, according to the show, he has this spear who never miss. Kind of true. And then they realizing that Zeus and Odin isn't the same, really, in that sense. Not the ancient aliens type of way, because then Odin doesn't have lightning. Yeah, that's Thor. What we mean to say is that Thor, he has a hammer, and if you look at it very nice, you notice that
has nothing to do with pounding.
You notice that it looks like Zeus lightning bolts because reasons. And they show this weird picture of Thor while doing this.
Yes! That was the most bizarre picture of Thor. It was like scrawny Thor from a whole different dimension in the multiverse. That was like, what?
I called it. It's a photoshopped guy picture of some guy LARPing.
It felt a little bit like it.
I used to create these photoshops in marketing. Like, this is not real.
But they're confusing Zeus and Thor and Odin because they realizing that it doesn't really add up, and just hope that the audience doesn't realize it. And then they switch to India. because similarities. They talk about this. Van Daniken talk about the mother spaceship in India culture called the Vimana, which...
There you can read, some thousands of years ago, gigantic cities surrounded our planet. They used the word cities because they had no word for mother spaceship. And of a sudden, out of these cities, smaller spacecrafts came out. Of course, in ancient Indian, they had no word like spacecraft. So they called it Vimana.
It's not new to the show, but the Vimanas they talk about comes from a book written in 1974, who was dictated by a medium to a guy, and shows these weird cyberpunk versions of aircraft.
I'm not at all reminded of Joseph Smith and the Mormons and the variations that were dictated to him. Also,
I forgot all about that.
Yeah. So my mother is from Croatia. My father was from India. They met in California in the 60s, in Berkeley in the 60s. Like, that's the whole story. But I grew up reading children's versions of the Mahabharata and the Rig Vedas and the Panchtantra. And by the way, it's not Mahabharata. It's Mahabharata. Just saying.
Okay, sure.
I'm just saying it's Mahabharata.
Yeah, and if we go back in the Indian text, it's in the earliest one they really don't bring it up as flying palaces, but it evolves as you read the text naturally. So, and based a few, as I said, we have encountered this before. So you go from horses to chariots to palaces with wheels, and then palaces without wheels that fly around. Normal things that, happens as stories evolve.
Absolutely.
And then we go from the Vimanas to the fiery wagon of Enoch, except that it's Elijah who encountered the fiery wagon. He isn't picked up in it. He just sees it. He's picked up by a whirlwind in the story, but
Tornado?
they mix up Enoch.
Sorry.
Yeah, they get the name wrong. This is Christianity. That's right there triggered bad memories from what is called Sunday school in many Protestant churches in the United States that I now refer to as brainwashing. But yeah, it was like they can't even get the Christianity, or that's actually Old Testament. So that's even predating Christianity. Oh my God, I was just like, Oh, wait, was it Old Testament? You see, now I'm questioning myself. Damn it.
Elijah was Old
it's Old
Testament.
Testament.
Yeah. Elijah and Enoch.
Okay, yeah. They got, Oh, I'm confusing somebody else in the New Testament that was buddies with Jesus. Never mind. Ignore me. They got the name wrong.
So, in one of our earlier episodes, I'm not sure if it was a Patreon one or not, 190 proof, our fangirl episodes, but remember there was a meteor that exploded over Siberia. I think it was like 2013. Like it shattered
that
windows.
Sounds familiar.
It was this incredible bright flash of light. It rocked the earth.
Yes.
And
it was caught on video from a lot of
dash
cameras,
taxi dash cams. But it could have been Enoch or Elijah. I'm just going to leave that
Elijah.
There is no fucking chance.
But then they start to talk about, got Van Daniken really excited, I assume. Something that
for a
Kenneth...
fascist Swiss author.
Yeah.
As excited as he gets.
Ken Fader called this hypothesis the horny spaceman theory, which is quite common in ancient alien lore, that the aliens come and breed with humans. Because we're switching to, the breeding part, which is quite common in Greek mythology. And we have this fantastic quote from Georgios Sokolos that those women actually had sex with extraterrestrials, not with the gods, because gods do not exist.
When all these encounters happened, and when women slept with those gods, which can be found in multiple texts all around the planet, that those women actually had sex with extraterrestrials, not with gods, because gods do not exist.
Oh, yeah, that sentence, when he said that, I went into a Cait-like rage. I was, oh my God. Oh,
fuck my life.
I think I typed in my little notes, OMFG, 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 just over. It was, I went over the edge at that point. Like, oh my God.
So are they saying, so I need clarification, because there is a multi-part origin story of humanity in Hesiod and the Theogony, according to that. Zeus, somebody let Zeus and the Play-Doh loose in the garage with welding equipment. And, there's just, there are several versions of humanity that Zeus goes through. And apparently the literal best period of humanity was when he created the men out of gold, and there were no women, just goats. And that was the ideal time of humanity. So, but also if you want to go with the, proto-Christian Socratic idea of, what happened in the symposium when they were talking about how Zeus actually fucked up and created man and woman all in one, and they couldn't move anywhere because you had two sets of arms and two sets of legs trying to move in the separate direction. And that's why Zeus was like, oh shit, I better separate them. And he separated them, and that's how you get men and women. And Socrates is like, bitch, please. True love is between older men and younger boys.
Yeah, that's common in the myth. But they talk a bit about the Zeus swan story, which they maybe romanticize a little bit here.
Bestiality. It's called bestiality.
Yeah, but
whether it's Zeus turning into an animal or the girl turning into an animal because of Hera. But I just...
Yeah, I don't really get the alien part of a swan having intercourse with a woman, but who am I? I don't know how aliens look like.
Do they know how bad-tempered swans are? Like, swans are like the prissy diva bitches of the bird world. Like, have you ever...
Right.
Like, in Boston, we had the Boston Garden, like the gardens and then the commons, but like in the gardens, there was this big pond in the center of it, and every year they had to erect fences like 20 feet around the swan breeding ground, because they're like,
very protective.
Extreme bodily harm may occur.
Yeah, swans can be very nasty.
They are nasty pieces of work.
So here is the part where we will talk a little bit about the Lovelock giant. And we have again Childress on site, and he says as follow.
And then they began finding human remains. They found up to 40 or 50 people inside this cave. One was allegedly 7 feet, 7 inches tall. They all had long, red hair and were literal giants.
So this is a variation on what's usually is being told. Others tend to focus on the cannibalism and the double rows of teeth and whatnot. But yes, there is a cave in western Nevada called the Lovelock Cave, located on the shores of Humboldt Lake. This cave was settled some 4,000 years ago. And what show is living out here is the miners didn't report this so quickly. It was almost a year later, and the early excavations were, well, poor, as unfortunately most of early 1900 archaeological excavation was. So that's one of the issues with archaeology. We can't replicate an excavation, and unfortunately quite a lot of sites have been destructed by, well, treasure hunters as they were back then. But we know that the cave was more or less abandoned in 440 CE due to a cave-in that cut off easy access to the cave. But the myth goes that the cave was inhabited by giant red-headed cannibals, and these giants were attacking the Paiutes. But the Paiutes got together and attacked the cave, and they lit fires outside, and eventually this is what killed them. And if you look up the ancient aliens or the giant proponents, they will talk about the Cait, that what they usually call the giants in the story. And then if you look this up, you will usually end up on paranormal New Age type of sites, but you won't find it mentioned by the, for example, Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, or in any academic way either. Strange, right? But if you have been with this show for a while, you probably guessing quite correctly that, of course, they are not using the proper term. So in the legends by the Paiute originally, they are called Sai Duka, or tool eaters. So this was because they ate this grass tool, according to the legends. So again, the strange habit of calling something for something else shows up here. But this claim, or the story about the Lovelock people, comes from a Sarah Winnemekwa Hopkin in a book that she published in 1882 called Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. In there she talks about a tribe who attacked them and tried to eat them. The Paiutes chased them and started to kill them in quite large numbers. A few survivors of the attackers hid in a cave where the Paiutes asked them to stop eating humans and become civilized. But this barbarian tribe refuses, and the Paiutes lit fires outside the cave, and they are eventually, well, killed by the smoke. So that's the origin of the story, or the, well, short gist of it. If you are interested in reading or listening more on it, Skeptoid did an excellent episode on it, which I would recommend you to go and read and listen to. But the short gist is that there was a tribe, there are stories about it, but the New Age / alien claims are quite exaggerated. And Children then moves on to talk about how discovering giants was quite popular during the 19th centuries. I'm not sure if he might talk about the Cardiff giant. Well, the Lovelock cave was found in the 20th century, but the giants he probably refers to are known as hoaxes. It must be the Cardiff giant and Elysia search too. And as you might know, the Cardiff giant was created by George Hull as a deliberate way to show how gullible religious people are. And, of course, to earn some money. Even P.T. Barnum got into the whole thing and started to create replicas of the giant and just put it a bit closer down the road and saying, this is the real Cardiff giant. And, well, people went there instead. So giants in the 19th century, as he alludes to, we're founding, is known hoaxes, basically. And if we go back to the archaeologists who worked on the site, and we're not talking today's archaeologists, we're talking about the OG finders. They were called Loud and Harrington, and they don't mention anything in their early publication about giants, except in a short paragraph that I could find. And I went through it quite thoroughly. But anyway, again, if you are more interested in this part, you can read Loud and Harrington's publication, Lovelock Cave, is going to be linked in the show notes. And of course, go and listen to Brian Dunning talking about the Lovelock giants. But here we have Childress come up into a museum, and here it starts to get dangerous when it starts to measure the cranium of the Native Americans. As you
Phrenology
might.
is not a science!
Basically, he doesn't use the skull, but he holds the skull in the hand and says, oh, this is from a giant. And no, I studied osteology. That is not a giant, that's a normal skull. And then and then he takes a jawbone from the person and the modern dental records or dental, mold, and put
forensic,
it.
That is not how you forensic odontology.
No, not at all. And he says, look, it doesn't match. And he makes a mistake. So he puts them side by side. So you can just take a computer and then put one over the other quite evenly and notice that it's no great change there. But the phonology here, again, is not great. But from here, we move to Israel and a little pottery found because they were going to talk about Goliath.
You can't see me, but I am reaching through the internet to squeeze that guy's neck like Homer and Bart Simpson.
They show this little fragment of ceramics. They even
Ostraka?
Yeah, they don't even get the location where they found it, right? Wow. So they talk about they found it in a moat by the wall. It was actually found in a house. And what they don't bring up that in 2008, they did extensive research on it and realizing that the translation was very optimistic and very long. So I will link the study to it. And you notice how it will differ because they spent like 4 pages talking about etymology and how ancient pro-Canaanite relates. But it's not, the pottery show does not say anything close to Goliath. That was a very optimistic first publication.
Jenn, you had feelings on this when you watched it.
I have some fuzzy memories. I feel like at some point in time, I was reading an article or I don't remember the source of this information. So take this with a grain of salt. In the Old Testament, the story of David and Goliath, the word giant doesn't actually appear in older versions. That's more of a modern...
So I realized that I make sort of mistake here. So I removed that. It is correct that the Bible does not say that the Goliath was a giant, but the measurement given for him is 6 cubits and a hand, so roughly 3 meters in today's translations. But if we go back to the Dead Sea Scroll, we learn that in the 1st century, he was only 2 meters and 6 centimeters, roughly, or 4 cubits and a hand. So he was in fact growing during the different translation. He would still be quite tall for the period, but not a giant. Let's go back to it. He was not descendant of angels in that sense, as I remember the story. I can look it up and
me next to Dwayne the
and
Rock
he's gonna look like a giant. And wasn't David young in this story? So yeah, David's gonna be small.
Yeah, and there's even discussion if David was really was really in the story from the start. So it might have been another king, but was more adapted to a king that people would know about. But yeah, he was supposed to be a youngling, not a child.
Right.
He was, a young man, but not as in the stories, scrawny little kid.
In episode 71, which in real time is about to be released, but in your episode release time will have been out for a few days. We talk about one of the first complete human genomes that was mapped from a victim in Pompeii. and it was of a man, and he was about 5'3", which was average.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you get somebody who's like 6'1", 6'2", and you play the game of ancient telephone, you know,
then
like,
all of a sudden you have a giant.
We're going on the last stretch here. That's, I think, the most off-putting part.
Rage-inducing?
Yeah, when they talk about how Homo sapiens has evolved within the last 3,000 years, and that's untrue. And then they put a lot of energy on, the size of the brain, which doesn't really...
That's not how you neurology...
tie together with with your intelligence. The Neanderthals, for example, had an average bigger brain that we have. Were they smarter? I don't know, but they're not around, so we can't ask them. But intelligence and cranial size isn't really connected in that sense. And we're just short of the cephalic index that was created by Ratzenius, Swedish scientist who basically created the phonology and lay the foundation for Nazi Germany's scientific experiments and
eugenics.
All of that.
Oh, yeah.
Basically. And we starting to talk
Hi,
about
von Daniken.
about the clone ship Dolly, because, all the different creatures in the mythologies were genetic experiments from the aliens, because they wanted to combine lions and different things. Make breedings and I laughed a little bit for myself, because while Van Daniken talks about the breeding, all of that, they start to zone in on the crutch on different statues for some reason.
So I actually did dig a little deeper into this, purely for my own edification, because I was, curious, like, why is there such small dick energy on all these really famous statues? And interestingly enough, so just like it's very difficult for us to divorce ourselves from our modern mindset about how we view relations with minors, especially of the same sex, when it comes to viewing the relationships of ancient Greece at the gymnasium, where you've got older men, where it's basically a cultural expectation that they will take a quote unquote minor under their wing. Obviously, I don't endorse this, and I think there is a lot of untranslated and untranslatable PTSD that shows up in ancient texts because of this. But, we are looking at it from our own modern perspective. So when I look at these ancient breedings and things like that, I'm like, take a step back and take a deep breath, because we're not looking at it in the same way as we should, as they would be. And it's almost impossible to truly divorce yourself from the perspective of where we are to go back ancient wise without any. But also, they were saying, in terms of the statue crotch size, they were saying it was an aesthetic choice because it indicated a degree of control over your carnal desires and your carnal impulses. And if you know anything about the ancient Greeks, they were, in a paradoxical way, all about control.
Of course.
Even though they had almost next to none. Wow.
No, but in here we talk quite a lot about, well, except for crotch and breeding, about DNA. And the fun thing is that the human genome was mapped by, I think it was one year or if it's not the same year as this show released. So if they just waited 1 year, they had black and white, that there's no alien mixed up in our DNA if they don't have the exact same DNA as we do, which actually is a theory that we're just time traveling aliens, but that's a completely different theory. But then we end this all out on the question, could there be aliens living among us? And they leave us hanging there. And we should fill in, yes, there are aliens living among us. But Jenn and Cait,
I think life would be more exciting if there were if there were actually aliens. Life would be way more exciting. They're not here. They're not.
That's not how you panspermic theory.
But Jenn and Cait, it's been great having you on here. If the listeners want to find more of you, where should they go?
Yes. So I'm going back up here because
we wrote our
even though we've
notes.
done this so many times, I still need a script.
Same.
So you can subscribe yourselves to our social media scrolls on Instagram at Drunk Mythology Gals.
We're also on Twitter at Drunk Myth Gals. Okay.
We're on Facebook at Drunk Mythology Gals.
And we have a website, drunkmythologygals.com.
We're on Patreon at patreon.com/drunkmythologygals, where you can get deep dives, lit crit hours, 190 proof fangirl episodes, just so much more.
Oh, it's random over there. It's so random over there on Patreon. And then if you want to attempt...
But you get stickers.
Yes, you can earn stickers if you last through an entire Patreon episode that's really long. Yeah, we'll mail you a sticker. Absolutely. Even to Stockholm.
Ooh.
Yeah, so if you want to attempt to email us, we have an email address, gals@drunkmythologygals.com, but we make no guarantees that we will check the email in a timely manner. Fredrik can attest to that.
Yeah, there was a small waiting time on it. But
just a little.
You answered?
We did.
Later.
Yes.
It's like the recording delay of this episode.
All right, I will let you go.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
And a big thank you to Cait and Jenn from Drunk Mythology Gals. It would have been a lot of fun to have the whole group, but as things played out, that was not possible this time. But I hope to have them back sooner or later. If you want to hear more from them, all their links and etc. will be found in the show notes. And you should check them out. There's a lot of interesting things to find in their show. And remember to leave a positive review anywhere you can, such as iTunes, Spotify, or to your friend at the Trench. I would also recommend you to visit diggingupancientaliens.com to find some more info about me and the podcast. You will also find me on most social media sites, and if you have comments, corrections, suggestions, or you just want to write an email in all caps, you find my contact info on the website. On our website, you will also find the sources and resources used to create this podcast. You will also often find further reading suggestions if you want to learn more about the subjects we bring up. The intro music was created by Alexander Nakarada, and the outro music is from a band called Trallskruv, who will sing us out with their song Tinfoil Hat. Links to both of these artists will be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep shoveling that science.
Men jag skyddar mig för jag har foliehatt. Och så säger ni det är en galen fantasi att Dödens manipulerar oss med telepati. Ni tycker att jag redan är besatt, men jag skyddar mig för jag
talking. I can start singing Jonas Brothers. Do you want me to start singing?
There you are. There you are.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.